statues. Some of them was 40, 50, 60 foot deep. The rest of the statue, did the faces kind of go along with those statues you found, those Mexicales, or however you pronounce it?
The Olmecs, yeah, right. You know, I mean, that's a good point. And in fact,
they had large eyes, and they looked like they had a sink in their forehead where they...
That's right. I mean, they are cone heads, too, what we were talking about. I mean, and that's an interesting point. When you start looking, particularly when you look at Olmec statues, statuettes, I mean, they really clearly have these long-gated heads. I mean, and they're quite narrow. I mean, they look like these weird cone heads. It's quite odd. Those statues on Easter Island are also these cone heads, these people with elongated skulls. And the Easter Island statues are so very unusual, and they have very long ears too. There's another distinctive feature there, where their earlobes in their ears are very long. The Incas also supposedly had these very long earlobes. And that's also a Buddhist thing. If you ever see depictions of Buddha, he also has very, very long ears, and stretched out ears. On Easter Island, I mean, they talk about a war that happened there in prehistory, and it was a war between the long ears and the short ears. Yeah, those statues are pretty strange, and many of them, too, just buried up to their chests in volcanic ash, and you would think that would take a long time just to have all this detritus. The islanders claim, like at Namadol, this island in Micronesia, where the islanders say that the stones flew through the air. On Easter Island, the legend there is that those statues walked. And those statues walked everywhere they are, and they're in various places around the island. And in fact, I mean, the islanders also say that power came out of their eyes. They put certain statues around the edge of the island, facing inland. And they had eyes that were inlaid in the statues. And according to the islanders, this power that they call mana, some kind of occult power, came out of their eyes, the eyes of these statues, and it was to protect the island, to keep it from sinking, because they believed that their island was part of this Pacific continent. They called it Hiva, H-I-V-A, Hiva. And Easter Island was the last little bit of this ancient continent, and the statues were there to keep it from sinking under the Pacific Ocean, too, like the rest of this continent.
What if they were robots? The statues robots? Is that possible?
Well, it's more like they were able to levitate the statues. The statues do not have feet, okay? They're basically from right around the waist up. And their hands come down, and their hands are sort of folded, typically in front of their belly. But that's how there's no legs or feet on the statues, but they're still huge, often 40, 60 feet high. I mean, some are gigantic, and some of the largest ones are still in the quarry, and they were never actually completed and removed from the quarry. But just exactly how you're going to, remove one of these giant statues, you got to stand it up, and then, it supposedly moves around the island. And some of the statues were supposedly up on cliffs and things like that, too. So their legend is basically that, they like levitated these statues and then moved them around the island to certain places. That's what they're saying.
All right. Hey, David, stay with us. We're going to come back and take final phone calls. All of David's websites are linked up at coasttocoastam.com, and I'll tell you, he is a true explorer, just absolutely remarkable. If you need to email me, that's George at coasttocoastam.com as well, and we'll be back in just a moment right here on Coast to Coast AM. David, do you think the ancients from this planet went to the moon before we got there in '69?
Yes, I do, actually. And I talk about that in my book, Extraterrestrial Archaeology, and there's a new DVD out about that, too. According to the ancient Indian epics, what we were talking about before, the Mahabharata and the Ramayana and whatnot, They say there that, yeah, they also went to the moon, and Atlanteans, allegedly have been there. I mean, it would be natural, in fact. I mean, if there have been civilizations, advanced civilizations before our own, say 10, 15,000 years ago, 20,000 years ago, and if they had space flight, aerospace, these aircraft, in theory, yeah, just like us, we were able to make it to the moon, so they could do that too. I maintain in my books, Atlantis and the Power System of the Gods, also the Technology of the Gods, and my book, Extraterrestrial Archaeology, that on the moon are pyramids, dome structures, and obelisks, and that those obelisks on the moon are identical, basically, to obelisks on Earth. Today, obelisks are really only seen in two countries, in Egypt and in Ethiopia. But other areas had obelisks too. And I mean, there's evidence that obelisks were once completely around the world, including at Tiwanaku in Bolivia. There was an obelisk there, supposedly. There was allegedly an obelisk actually in Lake Ontario. And I talk about that in my DVD, how this, back in the 1800s, there's this park, and it was on the Canadian side, and people would go out in the early 1800s to this, they would row out into Lake Ontario, near the Canadian side of the border, and there's a park right there, and this obelisk was just barely coming out of the water, and people would actually tie their rowboats up and have picnics and stuff there, and they could see down into the clear, waters of Lake Ontario. They could see this obelisk sticking up. There was a big storm then in 1805, and after this big storm, that obelisk, they would go out there and they didn't find it anymore. It apparently fell over. So, but I mean, incredibly, George, yeah, there are obelisks on the moon. They're called the Blair Cuspids. The Russians, particularly, have been interested in this. And a lot of the stuff about obelisks on the moon, there's certain grid patterns. There's a lot of stuff on the moon, and I know that you've talked about that, over and over again on the radio. But yes, I mean, so if there are artificial structures on the moon, then, I mean, it's natural to think, it's extraterrestrials, it's aliens. And again, maybe we're extraterrestrials and aliens. But yeah, the idea that Atlanteans, guys from ancient India and stuff like that, went to the moon, did stuff. There's an interesting video on YouTube that you can see that I've watched a couple of times, and it is apparently, it seems real. You got to wonder, but it seems to be the early astronauts from the Apollo moon missions, and they're walking through this crashed spaceship on the moon. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
Really? No. What's that called? I want to track that down.
It's worth seeing. I can't remember the name of it, but go onto YouTube and look for videos of the moon. But they're apparently, astronauts are going through this crashed spaceship. It's a little bit like that Alien movie.
How did whoever put it up on YouTube, how did they get it?
There's been a lot of videos from NASA that have been allegedly suppressed, and people find them. In fact, you can't even believe some of the stuff NASA tells you, how every once in a while it comes out in the news that they've actually lost, like, original footage of them on the moon and stuff like that.
Oh, no, that's true.
I mean, how bizarre is that? It's, when you see these sort of, weird videos like on YouTube that apparently show the Apollo astronauts doing something completely else, stuff that they don't admit to, and you watch it and you go, wow, that's pretty strange. I mean, either someone is, elaborately faking this NASA video, or else it's real. But it's, you find out too that within NASA and other areas like that, there are these whistleblowers. There are people who are working in these black budget projects and things. I mean, similar to Area 51 or something like that. And every once in a while, somebody comes out, they leak information.
They want us to know.
They do, yeah. People who are on the inside, they've signed top secret security clearances. They'll go to a military prison if they blab too much, but they're trying to leak this information. Your radio show is part of that, I guess.